I'm Tim Bradner. Welcome to Capitol Views. It's a special year this year, special historical year. It's the 40th anniversary of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline and the start of oil and our oil wealth from the North Slope. So we're fortunate to have a special guest with us today, two-time Speaker of the House, Gail Phillips, also Majority Leader. Welcome, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Tim.
Gail, you lived here and you were in the legislature, and you remember an era of Alaska before we had big oil from the North Slope. But Alaska's always had a natural resource mentality and been built on that was the premise of our statehood. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could reflect a little bit on what those years were like before oil.
Well, and I grew up in Nome, and Nome was a mining town. So that part of Alaska was very, very strong in mining. Other parts of Alaska, southeast was timber. Southwest and part of southeast was fishing. Palmer and Matanuska Valley was farming, agriculture. Kenai Peninsula was natural gas. And it was all these different resources in the different parts of Alaska, but there wasn't a cohesiveness to them. I mean, people in Nome, we didn't really understand what was going on with fisheries in southeast. And the people in the Matt Valley could probably care less about timber in the southeast, because at that time, every little area of Alaska, regional area of Alaska, had the resources that were prevalent in their areas. But it didn't have a huge statewide impact. Those resources didn't have a statewide impact.
Or a statewide tax base.
Or a statewide tax base to put money into the general fund so that it would be felt by people all over the state. And it wasn't until oil was discovered and oil came through the pipeline that we started taxing that resource and putting that money into the general fund. At that point in time, that revenue affected everybody in the state. And it tied in the whole premise of Alaska being a resource state in a different way than it was before the pipeline.
So previously, people in each region had their own relationship.
Right.
But these industries, I mean, everybody paid taxes in those days too.
Well, we paid an income tax, but there was not a lot of extraction taxes in those days. Now there's a tax on fisheries that goes partly to the state and partly to the local communities. There's a tax on mining, and there was a tax on timber. There's not much of a timber industry left anymore, which is very unfortunate. One of my civics books when I was in the 8th grade in Nome, timber and fisheries were the timber and mining were the #1 and #2 industries in Alaska.
That's amazing.
And that wasn't that many years ago. So, that whole picture has changed for Alaska. Those other resources, though, were pretty much regionalized until the pipeline came on.
Well, in each region, people supported their industry, the regional industry,
right.
and Alaskans support their oil industry too. But what seems to have changed is that it's the relationship between Alaska and its natural resources can tend to be very political at times too.
It can, although I think if people live here and work here, and especially if they have a job in one of the resource industries, they realize that is what is keeping Alaska going. And that is what enables all of us to live here and to have the good life we have here today.
Yeah, and Gail, you were in the legislature at the time when the oil revenues started really to kind of ramp up. Do you think we brought a lot of good things to the state with that too?
We did.
Maybe you could reflect a little bit on some of the benefits.
I mean, just having indoor plumbing is a huge benefit that the oil industry brought. Having almost every community in Alaska that has an airstrip or a good runway, all the ports and harbors that have been built all over Alaska. I mean, the transportation system that has been put into place, the energy systems that have been built and put into place, all those things very much benefited all of Alaska.
And we haven't finished the job either. I know there's a lot of communities that still don't have safe water and safe water still on the honey bucket.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe in this day and age.
I know, yeah. And especially since so many legislative sessions in the past really wanted to make that a focus and get that taken care of. And we still haven't completed it.
Well, we have a lot yet to do, and hopefully there's another 40 years for the pipeline
Yeah,
too.
it's hard to believe that it's been 40 years. I mean, just remembering how life was in Anchorage. We lived in Anchorage right at that time, and how life was in Anchorage in those days was just totally different than it is today.
Anchorage has become a much bigger city.
Yeah.
And all the cities have, including Nome.
Right,
Nome
right.
is a lot different now.
Well, and look at the major hospitals all across Alaska now, and a lot of areas with good energy systems in place, and all that.
Yeah. Well, we benefited.
Yeah,
Let's
for
hope we
sure.
can nurture it and continue
Yes,
it. So,
yes. For sure. I'd like my grandkids to be able to benefit from it too.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gail Phillips, for being with us. This is Tim Bradner with Capitol Views.